Welcome to Grossmont College, and welcome to Congresswoman Sara Jacobs Town Hall. My name is Denise Wissenhunt, and I am the proud president of Grossmont College. It is an honor to be here with you tonight and to welcome so many members of our community to our college. To begin our program, I'd like to invite you all to stand, if you are able, for our national anthem. The national anthem is being sung tonight by U.S. Navy retired veteran Treasurer Holmes. Ms. Holmes?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's great blast, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that a flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. Now I'd like to acknowledge a few people who have made this incredible event happen. Team Jacobs, thank you for your support of our community. I want to say Grossmont is so grateful for having the honor to work with you. Team Grossmont College, including Mark Russo for expertly guiding us in this space tonight, and our facilities team for being caretakers of this space and our beloved college. Our governing board of trustees in the Grossmont-Cuyamaca Community College District is in the audience tonight. Debbie Justison, Julie Short. Also in the audience is our esteemed chancellor, that is Dr. Lynn Saraceno-Nault. Again, we welcome you to Grossmont College. Grossmont College is your college. We are the flagship in the Grossmont-Cuyamaca Community College District, and for more than 60 years, we have served East County and the larger region by providing pathways to four-year universities and training our region's workforce. We really are a college committed to academic excellence. Our students transform their communities with the education that's provided to them here at our college. And tonight you are sitting in our beautiful Performing and Visual Arts Center. This was built by Proposition B and our local taxpayers. We thank you for your investment. Thank you. You've made in our college and in our students. I'm here on this stage tonight, but on every other night, the real stars are our students. This center is the heart of performing and visual arts in East County. We host the Hyde Art Gallery right outside these doors, which hosts some of the region's best and most thought-provoking exhibits. This stage hosts our student-led dance performances, music concerts, theater productions, and so much more. Plus our Griffin Community Concerts bring world-class talent right here to East County. And we invite you, we want you to come back. Mi casa su casa, we need you to come back to your center to be a part of the Grossmont College experience. Thank you so very much for being here tonight. And we want to give a very special thank you again to Congresswoman Sara Jacobs and her entire team for choosing our college for this evening. So now, I'll turn over to our moderator for this evening. Please join me in welcoming Amy Kuhn, Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, Chief of Staff.
All right, hello everyone, good evening. Thank you. As President Wisenhunt mentioned, my name is Amy Kuhn. I serve as Congresswoman Jacobs, Chief of Staff. Thank you all for spending your Tuesday evening with us. A huge shout out and thank you to President Wisenhunt, Ernesto Rivera, and the entire Grossmont College team for hosting us. They have been phenomenal to work with, and I hope you all have a lovely evening we have in store for you. A few ground rules before we get started. If possible, we ask that you keep your commentary to a minimum and ask one question each to the Congresswoman. That way we can get through as many as possible. Because this is an official government event, please, if at all possible, avoid any campaign or candidate questions, including specific questions about the 2026 election, the 2028 election, questions about voting rights, the protection of elections. All of that is fair game and perfectly fine, but the Congresswoman just won't be able to engage in any sort of campaign-related questions. We know that folks are incredibly passionate. Please know that repeatedly disruptive attendees will be asked to leave and can resume their activities just outside the venue. This event is being live streamed, and will be available on our social media and available to watch after the town hall is over. Information on all of our town halls can be found on Congresswoman's website, sarajacobs.house.gov/town-halls. I have on good authority that if you Google Sara Jacobs Town Halls, it's also the first result. Make it a little easy for you. You should have been able to complete a note card with a question for Congresswoman Jacobs. I've already been handed the initial very large stack. Appreciate that very much. If you have a completed card, please hand it to the closest staff member. And then if you need one, please also ask them. Got Kate here, some additional folks all around the auditorium. They'll be handing me some note cards throughout the event as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call 4 names at a time. And we just ask those folks make their way to the nearest microphone. We'll have you ask the first person ask a question, the Congresswoman will answer, and then we'll go through that, and I'll call an additional 4 names, and so on and so forth. Try to be able to get through as many as possible, but not have folks standing for too long. As I mentioned, in the interest of time, please, if possible, limit yourself to 1 question. I know some of you submitted many, but you can pick the one that's most burning in your heart. And with that, please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Sara Jacobs.
San Diego day today, so I am really, really grateful that you chose to be here because This is really what makes our democracy a democracy, right? People showing up, talking to your elected representatives, having this dialogue. So, first of all, I want to make sure you know you can ask me any question. We are not screening for only nice questions. We want to hear from you. And I represent all 800,000 people in this district, whether you voted for me or not. And we want to make sure we're having that dialogue. If we don't get to your question tonight, as long as you put your contact information on your card, we will get you an answer. So we will try to get through as many as we can, but also know that if we don't get to you, we will try and get you an answer. Please put your contact information on the card so that we can. I know that a lot of folks here are really concerned, frustrated, overwhelmed, angry about what we're seeing in the country right now. And I share all of those feelings. There's probably even more synonyms we could come up with for that. And some of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about is actually how we work in this moment to recognize how we got here. Because the status quo actually wasn't working for so many families here in San Diego and across the country, right? The status quo meant that 14% of the kids who are eligible for child care assistance actually received it. The status quo meant that many of your kids and grandkids, many of my friends, couldn't stay in San Diego because they couldn't afford to, even though they wanted to, even though they grew up here. The status quo meant that we were failing too many people. But dismantling the government, dismantling all of these programs meant to help people also isn't the answer. And we've seen now DOGE cut USAID, CFPB, Department of Education, NIH, and so much more. And the fact of the matter is, this isn't about government efficiency. In fact, I have many bipartisan bills about how we do government better, how we get a more efficient government. But this slashing and burning, this move fast and break things and figure out the answer later is not actually how we make government more efficient. In fact, it's making government less efficient in many ways because now they're having to rehire people, they're having to figure things out, people are having to wait a long time to get their questions answered at the Social Security Administration and so many other places that people rely on, which is why I've introduced the Delete DOGE Act. Which would prohibit any federal funding being used for the efforts of DOGE. And if they want to do government efficiency, which I hope they do because I think it's important, they need to come to Congress and we should do our job and go line by line through the budget to make it more efficient. One of the things that is going through Congress right now, probably the biggest part of President Trump's agenda is this big budget framework. Many of you have probably heard about it. They're doing it through a process that does not require Democratic votes, and so they are not coming to us for any feedback. But it has now passed the House and the Senate, so this is the budget framework they're working on for this reconciliation process. Right now, at minimum, it cuts $1.5 trillion overall. It demands a minimum of $880 billion worth of cuts from the committee that has Medicaid in their jurisdiction, and there is no way to get to $880 billion worth of cuts in that committee's jurisdiction without cutting deep into Medicaid. The tax cuts for the rich and big corporations are going to be up to $5.3 trillion, and despite being the party of supposed fiscal responsibility, this will add $4 trillion to the national debt and not do the kinds of cost-effective investments we know make sense, like, for instance, investments in high-quality early childhood education, which have a 6-to-1 return on investment, which is an excellent return on investment in any sector. So that's why I voted no on that budget resolution, and I'm going to keep fighting to protect the programs that our community relies on, while also constantly thinking about how we can make our government work better and more efficient for everyone in our community. And I know often what you see in the news is a lot of rancor and fighting in Washington, D.C., and that is a lot of what we do, but it's not all of what we do. And I told you all when you first elected me that I will work with anyone to get things done for our community, and I have done that. So I partnered with Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican from Florida, another millennial in Congress, to try and get proxy voting for members of Congress who give birth or their spouses who give birth so that we can have more representatives in Congress. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get that done, but we're going to keep fighting. I also introduced a bill, the IVF for Military Families Act, and have directly appealed to President Trump, who has said he supports IVF. And, well, if you want to support IVF, here's an excellent way to make sure that we actually expand access to IVF. And who is more deserving than our service members who we are asking to do very dangerous things in their prime and productive years? And actually this morning, if I smell a little bad, it's because I spent this morning down at the border at the Tijuana River Valley with EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, talking about what we can be doing to address the TRE crisis and make sure that this over $600 million of congressionally appropriated funds we were able to get for this crisis actually gets spent and gets spent in the way we need it to get spent, and that we're doing everything we can to finally address this crisis, and so that 20 years from now, we are not still having this same conversation. So look, I started this off saying that we're all feeling kind of anxious and frustrated and afraid. But I think many of you know, before I came to Congress, I worked in post-conflict stabilization, post-coup transitions. And I do believe we're in a constitutional crisis. And I do think that we are seeing really, really dangerous signs of the administration challenging and defying court orders and openly defying 9-0 Supreme Court decisions. But I also know from other countries around the world that have seen democratic backsliding, that if we are able to put together a big pro-democracy, small d, pro-democracy movement, that actually we have a pretty good chance of getting a better democracy on the other side. And the most important thing to be able to do that is people getting involved. So that's what you all are doing tonight. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your time engaging in the very messy, difficult work of democracy. I am so glad you all are here, and I'm excited to take your questions. So thanks so much. Oh, and one more thing, I see some very cute little kids. Please don't worry about them making noise. I'm delighted that they are here.
Alrighty, our first four names to come to the nearest microphone: Jim Batterson, Jacob Britton, Anne-Marie Sundquist, and Matthew Scherer. 4 people.
No pressure, guys. Oh, right.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, nice to see you. Is there anything you would work on with the Trump administration, or agree with anything the Trump administration would do? I'm just really curious.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So as I mentioned, President Trump has said he wants to be the fertilization president, which is a little bit of a gross way to say it, but okay, sure, the father of IVF, great. I'm taking him at his word, and we are trying to see what we can work with the administration on to improve access to fertility treatments across the board, because I think reproductive freedom and justice is not only the decision not to have a kid, but also the decision and the ability to have access to have a kid if that's what you want to do. And so we're working with the Trump administration to try and do that. As I mentioned, I've been working with EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin on the Tijuana River Valley. We, in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the big military bill we pass through the Armed Services Committee every year, have historically been able to have a very bipartisan approach to military quality of life issues. And I'm hoping that this year we'll be able to work with the administration to do the same.
Hi there. My name's Jacob. I don't remember my question 100%. So.
Do you want Amy to read it to you? No, you can ask whatever's on your mind.
Okay, yeah. I'll kind of try to get the gist of it, but like the main thing that's on my mind right now is like, I've really seen my generation, Gen Z, kind of like slide into this rightward-leaning generation, and it's one thing that really scares me. So what advice would you give me to talk to my peers, or ways to engage my peers to look towards the left and see the joy and the pride and the excitement of our future rather than leaning into this ultra-right kind of
Well, it's such a good question, and it's something I think about all the time because, while in the real world, 36 is like a normal age, in Congress, I'm like a fetus. I think I'm currently the 11th youngest member of Congress, but when I got there, I was like one of the youngest, and so I spend a lot of time thinking about how we reach out to young people and how we make sure that young people feel like their voices are heard. And, you know, in my read of history, honestly, young people have often led the way, right? Whether it was the civil rights movement or the LGBTQ plus movement, now the climate movement, young people are usually on the right side of history. And so if we've lost young people, that I think requires some introspection on our part. I wrote an op-ed in Teen Vogue. We have your contact information, so we'll send it to you. But it's all about what I think we need to do to address this. And a big part of it is that while I think that a lot of what we did under the 4 years of the Biden administration was really good and really important, at the end of the day, a lot of what we were able to get done didn't actually address the core needs of young people, right? If you're a young person, your biggest expense is housing. And if you have kids, your next biggest expense, or maybe more in some cases, is childcare. And actually, despite all of our best efforts in the House, we were not able to get anything done on those. And so not only were young people dealing with inflation, but they were dealing with housing and childcare going up in cost even more than inflation. And we weren't able to get anything done. And this current Congress is the third oldest Congress in history. Yeah, in history. Think about how long history is. And I think some of that really goes to the kinds of policies we're making, right? Like, we did a lot of really important things in the Inflation Reduction Act, for instance, but a lot of it helped a certain group of people because that's who's in Congress. I literally had a colleague tell me, oh, we don't need to invest in childcare. Don't they just have an aunt down the street that can help out? No, they don't. Also, that aunt's probably still working. Also, why are we running our government or running our economy on unpaid female labor? Right? A whole lot of questions about it. But this was a Democratic colleague who asked me this, right? And so I think that one of the things we need to do is get more young people into office so that we can better address this issue. Now, we also need to better talk to young people and meet them where they are. And I find a lot of my colleagues, when young people are challenging them or asking them questions, they respond with like a, you just need to learn more kind of approach. And like, I remember being in college and in my 20s. That didn't go over so well. I can't imagine it goes over well now. I don't think it goes over well really with anybody. And I think we need to listen to people and we need to meet them where they are. And we need to be talking their language, right? Like going on the podcasts, doing all of the different, kinds of ways that people actually receive their information now, because people are not getting all of their information from cable news and newspapers. I don't even really do that. That's not where I get my information, right? Like, we need to adjust to what the new media ecosystem looks like, and in a lot of cases, right, what we're seeing from young people is not that they didn't like our message, it's that they never got it. And what they understood of what the Democratic Party message was what other people were telling them it was. And so I think showing up is a big part of it, and showing up and being humble and listening and recognizing where we haven't actually come through. And for you and talking to your friends, I think it's really talking about the human impacts of what's happening right now. Because it's very easy in the abstract to think like, oh yeah, I want this, I want everything to break. But the fact of the matter is, like, 40% of all births in this country are covered by Medicaid. And that's going to impact a lot of young people, right? So the real human impacts of what we're facing right now, I think, is the best way to really talk to young people. And if you have a group of young people you want me to come talk to, just let us know, because I'm always talking to young people is like my favorite thing. So if any of you have young people, any teachers in the room, invite me to your classroom, I will come.
Forgive me for asking a different question than the one. I would assert that there is torture going on in El Salvador. Why do we allow this?
It's a really good question. I am very close with Chris Van Hollen. Actually, we do a lot of work on human rights issues together. And I was really impressed to see how much he was able to get done in his trip to El Salvador on behalf of his constituent, Mr. Abrego Garcia. And I think while Abrego Garcia is the name we know and the case we know, that's only one of the very, very many people who have been sent there, and we don't even know if they are actually the gang members that are being asserted because there was no due process in order to ascertain that. And I'm very concerned both about the conditions at CCOT, at the prison in El Salvador, and the fact that they have not been given due process under the Alien Enemies Act. Even the horrible things that were done using that legislation in World War II, people still received a hearing. And these folks didn't even receive a hearing. In fact, even the law of war detainees in Guantanamo received more due process than the people who the Trump administration deported under the Alien Enemies Act. Right? That's how bad it is. And I think it's really concerning, not only that we're seeing this happen, but that we've seen a number of judicial orders, including a 9-0 Supreme Court order. And under this Supreme Court, we never get a 9-0 order. A 9-0 Supreme Court order literally being flouted by the administration and having the Attorney General say that she's not going to abide by it. And so, look, we're in the minority in the House and the Senate. We have limited tools at our disposal, right? We don't have subpoena power. We don't have standing to sue. I think one of the most important things that we all can be doing right now, given the tools that we do have, is continuing to speak up and not let them distract us with the next emergency and the next bad thing and think that this will go away, but actually continue to highlight how bad this is and how unconstitutional this is and how illegal this is, and continue to highlight and share stories and talk about this so that we don't just get distracted and continue on to the next crisis, but we continue to hammer on this issue.
Hi, my name is Anne-Marie Sunquist and I come from Homo. And I am the chair of an advocacy group here in the county, and we just met with Alan Schiff's office yesterday, asking him, who is our leader? We are marching, we are writing postcards, we are knocking on doors, we are making phone calls, and we feel defeated. And we're looking for a leader who's going to fight for us and lead us and tell us what we need to do to keep fighting, to keep motivated. Are you a leader?
I hope so. I think so. I basically wake up every day and think, what can I be doing today to protect our democracy? What can I be doing today to make sure that I am doing everything I can to protect my constituents, to protect American democracy, to make sure that we are doing everything we can? Because I know, from my history working in other countries, that is important, that we can't let ourselves feel hopeless because we do still have agency. And first of all, you all, good job, congratulations, you did step number 1. You showed up tonight. But there's a lot more we all need to do. And one of the things I think is really important is continuing to highlight the real human impacts of what's happening. Because often when we're talking about these things, right, it feels like academic, right? Okay, democracy, Supreme Court, like, if you're just someone trying to get by day to day, you're not thinking about these kind of lofty ideas. And often when we talk about federal government programs, it feels like monopoly money because we're talking in like billions and trillions of dollars. And it feels like an alphabet soup of programs that mean nothing to you. And so the more we can highlight the real human impacts of these things, these cuts, these policies, I think the more success we can have. For instance, here in El Cajon, actually, at Sandy Cedar Health Clinic in El Cajon, I held a roundtable with folks who rely on Medicaid for their health care. And I heard from a mom who relies on Medicaid for her special needs son to get the medicine that he needs, and if she didn't have Medicaid, she would be able to afford 1 week of medicine for him. She works full time. I heard from another man who got hurt on the job, right? Got hurt on the job, but because the insurance he had for his company required all of these upfront payments he couldn't afford, the only way he could get the rehab he needed to be able to go back to work was through Medicaid. Medicaid is Medi-Cal here in California. Medicaid. Without Medicaid, he wouldn't have been able to go back to work ever, right? And so these are the kinds of stories we need to be telling, because a lot of people are going to be hurt by the cuts we're seeing in the policies, and they're not all going to be people who voted for me, who voted for Kamala Harris. And, for instance, rural communities, like you live in Hamul, right? A lot of the rural health clinics rely on Medicaid reimbursements to be able to stay open. And if they didn't exist, if Medicaid wasn't reimbursing them, they would have to close. So this is definitely even just impact people who rely on Medicaid, although that is 1 in 6 San Diegans, so quite a lot. But it impacts everybody. And the more we can be talking about that, and then the more that we can be welcoming people into the coalition, regardless of their political leanings and regardless of who they voted for, the bigger, stronger coalition we can have, and the better our pushback will be. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you all for what you're doing. And I hope that I'm your leader, but if you have other ideas of what you want me to be doing, you know where to find me.
Set of names: Mark Ottman, Jan Brown, Allison Smith, Betty Shavitz. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing anyone's name.
And also, while people are coming to the microphones, we're still accepting questions. So if you need a note card, if you have other questions, please send them in. Amy is getting a steady feed from our folks in the crowd, so please continue to send in your questions.
Congresswoman. I'm Mark Ottman from La Mesa. My big question to you is, and just in summarizing what I wrote on the card, is what actionable steps can your constituents take? And it's hard from my position to sit there and try to do all this research when I feel like maybe your staff have quicker ways to guide us. I'm involved as a member with ACLU at Blue. I'm tired of donating because all I do is donate and then they ask for another $15.
I know.
And I want to know what I can do. And I think of my time here in California protesting in Sacramento and going right down and doing as much protesting as I could. But also I'm thinking of some of our congressional districts that we can flip. And I'm trying to be more precision, and guide us. Maybe we take a bus to the Central Valley and help some of your, Democratic constituents win their districts.
Yeah.
Because just sending $15 in, I don't know where it's going. It just goes somewhere. And so help us. What can we do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to be very careful in how I answer your question because this is an official government event, but confine me at a non-official way, and I will have some more specific answers for you. But look, first of all, I think what you all are doing is the most important first step, right? Showing up, holding your representatives accountable, asking questions. The second is there's a lot of myth and disinformation going around. It's a lot coming at us right now, right? And I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little nerdy on you, but this is who you voted for. I spend a lot of time looking at research on myth and disinformation and how we counter it, right? So there's this really wonderful RAND study, for those of you who are interested, that looked at Russian disinformation in Africa. I'm the ranking member on the Africa subcommittee, so this is something I spent a lot of time working on. Right? You remember me, highest ranking Democrat, if you were in the majority, that would be the chair. And what they say is that you can't combat a fire hose of misinformation with a squirt gun of truth, right? And actually, I know it's a great metaphor, right? Actually, when you try and rebut point for point, people are not following that closely. Often, they can't remember which is true and which is fake, they just remember an association. And the best way to actually address these issues is to pre-but and shape the framing within which people are receiving information, but then also to have trusted messengers that people trust to talk to them about these issues. And so, I think we've kind of lost the muscle of like real community building, right? Like the internet has made it almost too easy to community build in a way that's actually made it so that we're not doing any of the real community building. There's a really interesting book I read. Again, sorry, I'm a nerd. This is what you get. Called Twitter and Tear Gas by Zeynep Tufekci, if you're interested in reading it. And what it says is that actually you can see a marked difference in protest movements pre and post social media. Because if you look at the March on Washington, one of the reasons the March on Washington was so impactful is because back then, in order to get that many people in the same place at the same time, required a lot of organization. And so it was a culmination, it was kind of a showing of how much real organization and community building existed. Now, you can like put a Facebook post on and a bunch of people can show up in the same place. And so now all of that community building and organizing that they had to do beforehand, we almost have to do after the fact. And so it's kind of changed what these things look like. And so the more we can just like as humans reach out to the people in our lives and talk about the real human impacts of these things, humanize these issues, be the trusted messengers all over, not just, here in our district, but with your friends and family members and loved ones all over the country, I think the more we can break through. And it's starting to work, right? Like David Valadeo in the Central Valley, 67% of his district relies on Medicaid for healthcare. And you know who was one of only 2 Republicans who didn't vote for that budget resolution that was gonna cut Medicaid? David Valadeo. Now, he didn't vote no, he just took a walk and didn't vote, but that's progress, right? And those are the kinds of things, these kinds of human community building, that muscle we've lost a little bit. I think that's really what we need to do. Okay, also we don't need to clap after every answer. It's okay, save the time, I know. If you're really moved to, feel free, but.
Hello, Ms. Jacobs. I met you briefly at the Hands Off rally, and it's nice to see you again. I'm a little confused about something because I've only seen one side of this. With regards to Chuck Schumer, when he voted along the lines with the Republicans to, as a tactic to keep Trump and evidently Musk from cutting Medicaid right away at that moment in time, if things did go out to have a different turnout. Can you explain to me why that was so bad? Because when I saw him on The View, it sounded like a great strategy to give us more time. Could you explain that to me? I'm just kind of confused.
Yeah, totally. A lot of what's happened, I feel like there's so much coming at us, right? It's hard to follow the ins and outs of everything. A side plug, follow me on social media, Sara Jacobs, or my newsletter, which you can sign up for at sarajacobs.com, and we try and break down everything and why we vote certain ways and what's happening. And if you have a question that we're not answering, just send us a message, because we try and make sure we're explaining everything as best we can. Sometimes while I'm doing my makeup, in case you want a makeup tutorial while you're doing policy. I do eyeliner in the car, if you want to know how that's done. Follow me on social media. So to answer your question, there was kind of two sides to this, right? And what House Democrats felt, and basically every House Democrat voted against this, was that we're basically already in a government shutdown, and anything that legitimizes what the executive branch is doing actually both hurts our litigation efforts and also puts some bipartisan imprimatur on what we feel like is illegal action by the executive branch in not spending congressionally appropriated funding or not abiding by statute, like that, for instance, USAID is an independent agency by statute, and then they just get rid of it. There was people, including Leader Schumer, who made the argument that, in fact, a government shutdown would be more advantageous to Donald Trump. And the gist of the basis of that argument was that in a shutdown, which is true, the executive gets to decide which pieces of the federal government are essential and which aren't, and so which stays open and which don't. And I think that there's an argument to be made that was a call. I would argue if that was the choice he was going to make, he should have had a conversation with House Democrats ahead of time before we all voted on it. But, besides the process foul, I also think it just fundamentally misunderstands the moment that we're in, where we are in fact already in a place where the executive branch is deciding what parts of the congressionally appropriated funding they are going to spend or not, and which statutes, which laws they're going to abide by and not. And so I am very concerned about sort of the follow-on implications of what it means to have this now bipartisan imprimatur on what they're doing in terms of our court cases going forward and all the other efforts. Yeah.
You partially answered my question. What's the best way to research disinformation? And there was a second part to it. Are there any really decent Republicans to work with?
Okay, so we have your contact information. I will send you this RAND study. It's very good. I think there's also some other really good research on topic of disinformation and how you can address it. And again, almost all of them show that trusted messengers are the key part, and like real human interaction outside of the internet ecosphere it is really important. So we'll send you those studies. See Amy taking a note right now to make sure that we actually do that. There are okay. I have to work with all of these people, so I find the good in everybody somehow. But look, we are starting to see some Republicans stand up, right? Just yesterday, I think yesterday or today, Don Bacon said that Secretary Hegseth should be fired. David Valadeo didn't vote for this bill, budget resolution, which will not chisel in. And I think the more that we can help make sure that our Republican colleagues are hearing about the real human impact and not only sort of hearing from their constituents who are, in some cases, actually happy with what's happening, I think the dam is breaking. I think we're going to start to see more of them stand up. And look, I will work with anyone for our community. So if we can find one area of agreement, I will try and figure out if we can get that done. And we've had some success doing that. I mean, Amy's giving me a look. I even had 8 bills with Matt Gaetz. I know. But listen, I will work with anyone to get things done for our community, because that is the job.
Hi there, my name is Allison Smith. I live in El Cajon. I did not vote for you. You became my rep when we redistricted a few years ago. So I feel like I'm in the lion's den here, but hi, everybody.
No, please. I represent all 800,000 people in the district.
Well, just comment on that. I watch your Twitter feed, and it just seems like you're constantly bashing Republicans all the time, but that's not the reason I'm up here at the microphone. My question that I wrote down, and what I want to ask you again, even though you seem to address it at the beginning of this town hall, is how you could introduce a Delete Doge Act. Don't you want Doge to find waste, fraud, and abuse in our state?
Please don't move her. I want to.
To me, that's something we all should be able to agree on. We all pay taxes. We don't want our money wasted or given over to fraudulent use. And the other thing is that...
Wait, let her talk.
Like I said, I'm government spending is also a driver of inflation. When we talk about, that people can't afford housing, this or that, I just got my car insurance bill, went up $200 since November. I didn't get in any accidents. So when we talk about that, government spending is a driver of inflation. So why wouldn't we want to discover waste, fraud, and abuse and eliminate it? That's my basic question.
No, and first of all, thank you for your courage in showing up and actually asking the question, because these are the conversations we have. I will always listen to everybody. We might not agree, but I would rather you and I be able to have this conversation than you sort of sit at home and just be mad, or me give you some mealy-mouthed answer where you think we agree when we really don't. So I really appreciate you coming and showing up, because I know it's not easy. I think we need to make government more efficient, and I think we need to address waste, fraud, and abuse. I was actually very excited at first about the potential of what this kind of effort could be. In fact, I was Doge curious, as the Gen Zers might say. There was a congressional Doge caucus, and I was talking to the leaders of it to see some of the things that I've been trying to do around how we can address some of the waste, fraud, and abuse we see in DOD, for instance, and on the Armed Services Committee, or some of the ways we can address the administrative burden of being able to access the benefits that we are eligible for. If these are some of the things that we could work on together, I was actually quite interested in this possibility. Unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing actually happen, right? And I am very concerned that actually what we're seeing is making government less efficient in many ways. So, for instance, firing a bunch of people and then having to hire them back either because you realized it was a mistake or because of court cases is pretty inefficient. And, I'm very concerned about the fact that, for instance, they fired the people who answer the VA crisis line. They fired the people who track Ebola and bird flu, which is part of the reason why we're seeing our egg prices so high, especially here in California. And I don't think, for instance, firing the people who answer the phones at Social Security is making our government more efficient. Now there's an argument, there is a legitimate argument to be made, and I think a real conversation we need to be having about government spending and what we spend money on and why we spend money on it. I actually, despite representing San Diego and our very large military community, have often voted against the defense budget because I think it's too high and I think it has too much waste in it. And I don't think it's focused. However, if you actually look at the budget resolution that has passed the House and the Senate now, it would add $4 trillion to the deficit. And to me, that goes to show that actually this effort isn't really about making government more efficient for everyone. It's about finding some savings so that they can pay for tax cuts for people who don't need tax cuts instead of helping middle-class families. And instead of making the kinds of investments that we really need to be making. So, for instance, let's talk about Medicaid, right? Because that's been in the news a lot. A lot of research shows that investing in primary care medicine or preventative medicine saves us about $12 for every $1 we spend on it. Because if you can address an issue early, you won't have to have the more expensive emergency interventions, right? And we have a law in the United States that says that emergency rooms have to accept you regardless of your ability to pay, and they have to treat you regardless of your ability to pay. So if we're not addressing people's primary care preventative needs, then we're actually just spending more money when they come to the emergency room because they didn't get the sort of early interventions. And so to me, it's about thinking not do we spend money or do we not spend money, it's about what we spend money on and making sure we're spending money on the kinds of things that have really high ROI. To me, ROI, return on investment, to me, is what we need to be thinking about, and that's not what I'm seeing from the current DOGE effort and from this Republican budget. I hope we can get there. I would be delighted if my Republican colleagues came to me and said, actually, how can we address spending in a real comprehensive way that makes sure we're still delivering for people, but addressing the things our government, doesn't need to be doing. That isn't what they're doing. And they're doing this budget resolution in a way that they don't need any Democratic votes, and so they're not even talking to us to get some sort of bipartisan consensus on this. So look, I see from your face maybe we don't agree. Yeah. Yeah, and thank you so much for showing up and asking it, because again, I know it's not easy to show up. I appreciate it.
All right, I think we are ready for the next set of questions. We've got Suzanne Hansen, Violetta Lombera, Deborah Lord, and Alexandra Marcoux.
Hi, my name's Alexandra, a fellow millennial, so thank you for what you do. I'm a mother of 2 daughters. I've got a lot of people in my family that are very much affected by everything that's happening. I'm trying to figure out the best way to pose this. You've already kind of answered a lot of what I'm going to ask you. It used to be Democrats and Republicans were not the right and the wrong, right? It was just general things that were of different opinion. But it seems that morals and goodness are very much divided at this point. And so many Republicans in Congress seem to just be MAGA. It's no longer Republican, it is MAGA. Which to me is not an ethical position to be in. It's not moral, it's just not the right side. And it's a scary place as a mother and a daughter and all the things. So obviously you're working on bipartisan actions. You're doing everything that you can that they're willing to do. You said that the dam is starting to break. What is the actual feeling that you're getting from your colleagues in Congress that they realize that maybe they're not on the right side of history right now? Are they giving any indication that they're going to start making better choices and doing what's right and upholding our democracy? Or are they standing firm and digging in their heels and saying, well, this is how it goes, I'm on the right, so I gotta do it?
It's a really good question, right? Because when you look at how our Constitution was written, right, the idea was that you would be able to protect against a president or an executive that was taking too much power because Congress would stand up for congressional prerogative. And I think that we've seen a real breakdown in that, in part because partisanship has become more important than sort of your branch of government. Now, I will tell you privately, many of my colleagues will tell me that they are very concerned about what they're seeing right now. But we are only starting to see the tip of that becoming public, and a lot of what I'm trying to do is trying to help them be more public about that and give them some avenues to do that, right? Some legislation they could sign on to or what have you. Now, I think part of the challenge is that there are some people, many people, who aren't yet unhappy with what they're seeing. Because for many people, while they might not agree with everything Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing, they're happy that at least something is happening, and something is better than the status quo. And so I think part of what we need to do is do some real introspection about the role we played in people feeling like their needs are not being met and their government is not listening to them. And I think the more that we can offer an alternative that isn't the status quo or blow everything up, but a real other option of how we can reform things and make things better. And the more we can tell the real human stories of the impacts and make sure that they're hearing from their constituents, not only the ones who are happy that something's happening, but also the ones that are really hurt by this, I think the more we're going to start seeing people stand up.
Hello, Sarah. I am Violet, and I'm a
community advocate. I'm also a Head Start parent, and I am here because I want to know, how are you advocating for Head Start? Because we know that they're threatening us with cuts all the time. So how are you advocating for the families and the kids as well?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Thank you for being here. I love Head Start. I'm like a Head Start fangirl. When I say that, like, there have been lots of studies that show that quality early childhood interventions actually save us $6 for every $1 that we spend as the federal government. A lot of that is based on the very good work that Head Start and Early Head Start do. And to me, cutting Head Start and Early Head Start is the exact opposite of what we want to be doing if we want to be competitive in the world, right? And have a workforce that works. If we want to make sure that every kid has access to opportunities, or if we just want to cut our costs of healthcare and criminal justice and all these other things that we know follow on if you don't have quality early childhood education. So I'm fighting, like, constantly on this. Well, first of all, invite me to your school because hanging out with little kids is my favorite. When I have, like, a really difficult day, my team tries to put, like, a Head Start visit in or something so I can get some joy in my life. I think telling these stories, like, you coming here and talking about what Head Start has meant for you and your family, how it's enabled you to be able to go to work that you might otherwise not be able to if you didn't have that. Those are the kinds of ways that we can show people that this isn't just some sort of, like, handout, but actually something that's really important for our ability to make sure that everyone has opportunities. I honestly, like, to me, the idea that we're even fighting over Head Start is so mind-boggling because it's such a good investment. A 6-to-1 ROI. Like, that's really good. Like, that's really good. And actually, like, in years past, some of the Republican Congresses have tried to cut Head Start funding, and I've been one of the people leading the effort to make sure that we at least keep it steady or have been able actually to add some Head Start funding. And I'm going to keep fighting for this because, like I said, I think this is one of the best investments we can make. It's one of the most effective. If you want to talk about efficient government, Head Start is one of the most effective and efficient programs that the federal government runs. And I actually think we need to be expanding it, not talking about cutting it.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Hanson, and I first want to say thank you for having this town hall, and thank you for all that you do. You're an incredible leader. My question is, actually, I want to take a second to say that I believe that this act that's coming in front of the Congress and the Senate, actually it's already passed the Congress, is probably the single most important act, even more than the budget. I believe it's the most important act that's to come for the last 80 years. And I want to know, what is it that you're doing and what can I do to prevent the SAVE Act from passing?
So for those of you who don't know what the SAVE Act is, the SAVE Act is a bill that ostensibly says that only U.S. citizens can vote in federal elections. It is already the law that only U.S. citizens can vote in federal elections. It is already a felony if a non-citizen votes in a federal election, and independent sort of FBI, other folks have said that there is almost no incidence of non-citizens voting in elections, and when there is, they are prosecuted and that vote doesn't count. So it's kind of a solution in search of a problem, which is something we see a lot among my colleagues. So what it actually does is it says you have to prove your citizenship in person with physical documents to be able to vote. And what that means is that, for instance, if you are a person who changed their name when they got married and your birth certificate no longer matches your ID,
you might not be able to prove citizenship. Now, Democrats tried to introduce an amendment that said that marriage certificates would be a valid form of identification for this purpose, and Republicans wouldn't let that amendment come to the floor. So I know there's a lot of sort of talk about like whether or not this is actually a real issue. We tried to actually solve the issue, and they wouldn't let it come to the floor. It also means that if you don't have, on average, $160 to pay for a passport, you might not be able to vote. It also means if you're, for instance, a service member who lives overseas, or just like a really busy person who doesn't have time during business hours to show up to register to vote or to change your registration in person, you might not be able to vote. And so, to me, this is a really dangerous bill because under the guise of something we all agree with, which is that non-citizens should not vote in federal elections, they are actually restricting a lot. They're going to restrict a lot of people's ability to vote. Now, technically, in the Senate, this will require 60 votes. That means they'll need to get some Democratic votes for it. This is an official meeting, so I can't tell you what to do with that information, but I also think it's really important that we continue to talk about how fundamental these voting rights are, right? And that there is very little, there's been almost no, I think like less than 1%, no material impact of any sort of fraud in our federal elections. Our elections are secure, they were good. Every federal agency who oversees them has said that, and we should be making it easier for people to vote, not harder.
Hi, my name is Deborah Lord. I'm a retired grandmother from Rolanda Village and really concerned about saving democracy for my grandkids. I understand that Representative Al Green intends to file articles of impeachment by May 5th. I'm wondering if so, if you will vote for that and whether you think there are any Republicans who are now ready to move in that direction.
Okay, first more important question, how old are your grandkids?
They range from 1 to 20.
Oh, good range. So look, if Al Green's articles of impeachment ever come to the floor, I will vote for them. Given the House majority. In fact, like my first vote ever in Congress was to impeach Donald Trump because my birthday in office was January 6th, and that was not what I thought my first vote or my first floor speech was going to be about. It's been a wild 5 years. I think as we think about, first of all, I have not heard any of my Republican colleagues be ready for that step yet. And I think one of the most important things we need to think about when it comes to these things is the knock-on, the unintended consequences, right? And I actually worry that a failed impeachment effort will actually further embolden Trump in what he's doing. You know that old adage, if you aim for the king, you best not miss. I think we need to wait until we can actually have a successful one, which I don't think we are in that context yet.
All right, next 4 names. Claire Wolf, Bob Halvin, Charlotte Pagan, Yusuf Miller.
I'm sure you've heard the old adage, when you find yourself in a hole, the first thing you do is stop digging the hole deeper. We're in a hole, $35 trillion debt hole. Just in 1 year, we have spent $1 trillion just on the interest. What do we get for $1 trillion? Nothing. Not one service, not one good, Nothing. It is money down the toilet. So my question to you, how much more debt do we have to go into before you get on the House floor and call for either a constitutional amendment to a balanced budget, or at least start advocating for a balanced budget? Because you don't do that right now. I hear spend, spend, spend. So how much more debt do we have to go into? Give me a number.
Thank you for the question. So here's how I think about the debt and the deficit. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception that the federal government's budget is like a household budget. And that's just not necessarily the case, right? We are, well, until all this tariffs and the capital flight that we're seeing, we are the world's reserve currency, and so it operates a little bit differently. And so here's how I think about the debt and the deficit. To me, if you asked any business owner if they were willing to take on debt, so loan, in order to make a capital expenditure investment that would grow their business, probably 9 out of 10 times, their answer would be yes, right? Companies do it all the time. That's why we have a lot of these banks and loan opportunities. And so to me, the question is not necessarily, are we taking on debt? It's, are we spending, if we are taking on debt, are we spending that money on things that are going to grow our economy? And that's why I'm so focused on things like early childhood education that have a 6-to-1 return on investment, primary care medicine that has a 12-to-1 return on investment. The kinds of things that actually, if we make those investments, we will save money down the road. And I know my Republican colleagues like to talk about being the party of fiscal responsibility. The budget resolution that they basically all voted on would add $4 trillion to the deficit.
Is that over 10 years or just 1 year? Because you gave a lot of numbers at the beginning. Is that over a 10-year period?
I believe the $4 trillion would be over a 10-year period.
I believe all the numbers you gave were over a 10-year period, including the $880 billion of Medicaid cuts.
So what the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has said about the $880 billion, even over 10 years, is that there's no way to get to that number without deep cuts to Medicaid. So whether it's over 1 year or 10 years, to get to $880 billion per the Congressional Budget Office. I'm happy to, we can have a little wonky session on congressional budgeting in 10 years or 1 year if you all want. I'm trying to simplify things so that we don't spend our whole time on the very wonky details that I spend my time on. But whether it's 1 year or 10 years, the $880 billion, there's no way to get to it per CBO, per the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office without deep cuts to Medicaid. And same thing with the $4 trillion deficit. It's $4 trillion. And if you actually look, at our deficit right now, what our debt is and why we're paying such high interest rates, which I agree are a problem, what you see actually are the main contributors to the debt right now are the Trump tax cuts from 2017. Are the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, both Iraq. And then are some pandemic spending, which I would argue, in a crisis, that is what you want your government to do. You want to make sure that you're taking care of people in a crisis like the pandemic. And so, to me, as we're thinking about moving forward what this looks like, it is how are we making the right investments and how are we looking at the things. You know, the Trump administration is talking about a $1 trillion defense budget. $1 trillion with a T, $1 trillion defense budget, right? Like, how are we actually thinking about what the drivers of the deficit are and the budget, and how are we making the right kinds of investments so that we're growing our economy in the future? Well, I'm only 36 years old, so you cannot blame me for what happened 50 years ago.
going to talk about spending money. My name is Claire. I'm from Linda Vista. I work for PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. So it's very good. I'm also a Christian, and I think one of the things is that with all these foreign assistance cuts to refugee programs, HIV programs around the world, that there's so many faith-based groups and NGOs that do this work, and they've all had their funding taken away, they've all been fired. And I never really hear about Democrats working with Christians and faith-based organizations. Maybe they do and I don't, but I've been working for PEPFAR for 15 years, and I don't hear a lot about the news. So what are you and other Democrats doing to, one, about foreign assistance, but specifically asking about Christian and faith-based groups and all the important work they do around the world that's not happening now? Like, what are you doing about it with Christian and faith groups? How are you reaching out to them?
So, as I mentioned, I'm the ranking member, so the highest ranking Democrat on the subcommittee in the Foreign Affairs Committee on Africa and Foreign Assistance. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this issue, and PEPFAR is one of our most successful programs. For those of you who don't know, it's the President's Emergency Prevention Fund for AIDS Relief. I think I got that right. Almost? Yeah. It's HIV and AIDS relief around the world, and it was instituted by George W. Bush and a Republican Congress because of the HIV and AIDS crisis that we saw, and it was largely pushed by faith-based groups who saw that this was a real crisis around the world. And not only is it one of our best success stories in that we've been able to cut the prevalence of HIV and AIDS by an incredible amount, it's also one of the programs that really focuses on investing in local capacity building, so that actually a lot of health systems in general in these countries are strengthened because of the investments PEPFAR made. So for instance, you actually saw in a lot of these countries a better ability to respond to the COVID-19 crisis because of the health systems investments that PEPFAR made. So it's an excellent program. I actually convened a group of people to talk about what the future of foreign assistance looks like in this current environment. And it included a number of faith-based organizations, because they are some of our best implementers. And actually, a lot of the faith-based organizations are the best at working directly and getting funding directly to local organizations and local groups. And a lot of the local organizations and local groups that I have a bipartisan bill that would have had USAID give more funding directly to local organizations. A lot of those local organizations are faith-based, the ones on the ground, and so I think it's incredibly important. I think, one of the things we need to do more of actually is work and figure out how we can build the coalition again for people to understand why foreign assistance is such an important part of America's national security. And I think faith-based organizations and Christian organizations are an incredibly important part of that, because historically they have been the ones to help make sure that it's a bipartisan coalition, and we are now seeing that erode. So, we try and reach out as much as we can. We have, a number of these convenings. We don't get to control what hearings happen on the committee at the moment because we're in the minority, but we've had a number of committee hearings on sort of faith-based organizations and the work that they do. And now that we have your contact information, we also might reach out and see if you have other ideas on what we could be doing. Yeah.
Good evening, Yusef Miller. Today I'm representing the original Black Panther Party of Self-Defense and Community Empowerment of San Diego. And giving all the attention to people from this soil being trapped in jails overseas, for example, Brittany Griner, or we talk about El Salvador, the question is, are you willing to help us in our cross-border justice program where we're trying to get people back just across the border from Mexico? For example, Rodney Danzler crossed the border by accident. He missed the last exit, and as he tried to turn around right at the border, they asked to search his car, and they found a legal gun registered in the U.S., and they put him in jail for 1 year. Now, we, the Black Panther Party, worked on him in the last couple months and got him back to this country on this soil alone. We asked for help from all kinds of elected officials, including your office. We got no answers back, but we did it on our own. Now we have a 61-year-old lady who did the same thing, a registered gun here. She couldn't get on the last exit. She couldn't get out on the last exit, asked to turn around, and they arrested her, and she's currently incarcerated now. So the question is, can you help us with her and many others that we're working on to get a cross-border justice there just as much, at least half of what we're doing with El Salvador and the attention given to Brittany Griner?
Yeah, so actually, my office and I work directly on the Rodney Dancer case. We work directly with his family. Part of potentially why you didn't receive an answer, we have a lot of privacy laws, and my office still abides by those privacy laws. And so for casework, if any of you reach out to our office, you'll know this, we have you fill out a privacy form, and it means we also can't disclose that information to non-family members or people who aren't on the privacy form, but we did work directly with Rodney Dancer's family, and I personally talked to the Consul General, or the U.S. Consul General in Tijuana about this issue to help make sure that we were able to get him home, and we do that kind of casework all the time. So for this new case, I don't know if we've received casework on it or not, but have a family member reach out to our office, and they'll fill out the privacy release form, and then we'll see what we can do, and we'll do outreach. But that's true for anyone. If any of you have people of family members, we do a lot of this kind of oversight and advocacy work on behalf of our constituents and casework. In fact, the beautiful people you see around the room with the microphones are also the people who spend a lot of time doing this work on behalf of our constituents. So if any of you have had casework, you've probably heard from one of them. But yes, and a lot of what I'm doing right now is actually making sure that we're doing everything we can to address sort of the illegal incarceration of people who have not been given their due process. I actually went to Guantanamo a month ago now? Something like that. Time's a flat circle. A month ago now, to see the situation that migrants were being held in there. I visit the border regularly to make sure that I understand what's happening and what's happening with our citizens. And as we get casework, we advocate very aggressively on behalf of our constituents. So please have someone reach out about that case, and do know that we were in direct contact with Rodney Dancer's family and the Consul General in Tijuana on that issue.
Thank you for clearing that up. Just to make sure I understand, to have the families, we have about 5 cases, to have the families reach out to your office and sign a privacy release form, and then we can all work on this issue together.
That's right, and if they are not a constituent of mine, have them reach out to the senators, because the senators can do the whole state. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi there, I am Charlotte Hagen. I am an active duty military spouse, so my husband is a service member, and I volunteer with his command and the families as a liaison between the command and the families. And my biggest concern at this time is going to be cost of living. You brought it up early on, and San Diego, as I'm sure all of you know, has one of, if not the highest cost of living in the U.S. So majority of us military families don't choose to live here. I would choose it 100 times over. Like, I love it here. Don't send me back to Wisconsin. But sorry,
I'll make sure the Navy knows.
But what's the government doing on military families' behalf to get that cost of living allowance provided to us? I don't want to say provided because that sounds like it's a handout, but San Diego is the highest cost of living in the U.S. that does not receive that cost of living allowance. So, my husband and I are very fortunate. We're dual income, no kids, over in San Carlos stinks, but we're very fortunate. He's been in 12 years, a high ranking, but I see 18-year-olds, 2 kids, right out of boot camp. My husband came from boot camp, or was an instructor there, so I saw it all the time. And then coming out to San Diego, there's food banks directly for military families. There are, all these amazing organizations, but there shouldn't be. These people are putting their lives on the line. Like, my husband's on deployment right now. He'd be here, probably, hey, stop it. But we're without our family for 6, 8, 12 months out of the year. What is it on the government side, specifically for San Diego? Obviously everyone should be getting things, but specifically in the San Diego region.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service, because I spend enough time with military spouses to know that it's the whole family. So this is one of the key issues, the top issues I work on the Armed Services Committee. Actually, last term, we had a bipartisan quality of life panel, and we looked at, spouse employment issues, we looked at childcare, housing, compensation, and through that bipartisan effort, we were able to get a 12% increase in pay for junior enlisted service members. I was able to get in there a sort of fundamental change to how they do compensation for childcare workers at military childcare centers so that they can open more classrooms, and abolish the wait list for people who need fee assistance outside of the military childcare system, and also get rid of or increase the transparency of the wait list so that people don't have to rely on Facebook groups to know where they are on the wait list. So this is like a key issue of mine. And one of my real frustrations actually is the denialism that we get from the Department of Defense itself. So we actually just had a hearing on food in DoD on the Military Personnel Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee, which I sit on. And despite the fact that 40,000 members of military families visit the San Diego County Food Bank every single month, DoD tells me we have no food insecurity problem. And if only they just ate more at the DFAC or shopped at the commissary, all this would be solved. I've eaten at the DFAC, it's fine. You're not gonna bring your family there though, right? That's not really a viable option. And as you mentioned, the formula for how we do the sort of cost of living adjustment is very outdated. It has a very strong time lag. So,
not to mention that the onus is on us as the military families to fill out those surveys saying that this is what our cost of living is. This is what our cost of living is. We have to find that survey. We have to find our spouse and be like, hey, they said they sent that cost of living survey to you. Where is it? How do I find it? The families I work with at the command, no idea. What is this? It's a very important survey I need you to take. Well, everyone needs you to take. So I think that takes it back to my original question. What are they doing instead of putting the onus on military families to get that cost of living allowance?
So part of what I'm doing is we're advocating for the cost of living adjustment to be, one, quicker, right, to not have the time lag, and to use sort of readily available information. It's no secret that San Diego is very expensive. Why do we need you to fill out a survey to tell us that San Diego is very expensive? Use sort of publicly available information like median home prices, all those things. We've been pushing hard on that. In fact, part of why we were able to get the BAH increase that we did a couple of years ago was because we pushed hard on that. One of the difficult things about San Diego and a couple of other places that have such a high consolidation of military families is that actually, one of the things that we saw through that BAH, basic housing allowance, one of the things we saw in getting that BAH increased was it actually just increased rent across the board for everybody, right? Because there's so many military families that landlords then just kind of benchmark to the BAH. And so we are trying to figure out how we make sure our military service members are getting what they need without just increasing costs for everybody. One of the things we've been able to do is get the basic subsistence allowance for our junior enlisted service members. Unfortunately, it was constrained so much initially that I think the Marines told me they had 18 total people who were getting this basic subsistence allowance, even though we know there are many, many more who require it. And so we've now worked to expand the eligibility criteria. We're up to 200% of median income to be able to be eligible for the basic subsistence allowance, but still require service members to know about it and apply for it. And so I think there's a lot more that we need to be doing, and this is one of the areas where we do generally have bipartisan consensus to try and get these things done. Again, this bipartisan quality of life panel was incredibly successful, and we're hoping to be able to build on that this year. So I'm going to make sure we get your contact information, and Kate from my team, who's right here, covers our military, family, and veterans issues, and we're going to pick your brain on what else we can be doing.
Oh, there's lots.
Excellent. Love to hear it.
All right, it is 8:30, which is what was originally what we said as the end time of this event, but we've been working backstage, and the lovely folks at Grossmont are giving us a bit more time. We have lots of questions we want to keep going. So we've got another 30 minutes. I've got 8 more questions queued up here.
But I won't be offended if you have to leave.
That's a fair point. It is 8:30 on a Tuesday night. Many of you have other things to be doing. Yeah, please feel free to take off if you need to, but we do want to be as accessible as possible. So I've got 2 more stacks of 4 here, and hopefully we call some names of folks who have not left. Next 4, Keith Hass, Krista DeBoucher, Nikki McCullough, Dawn Jacobs.
Okay, I actually can't tell if you're getting up to ask a question or to leave. Okay, good. I see some people getting microphones. Excellent.
Amy, Keith can't remember his question totally. Can you give us a refresher?
Let me just read it. How far along is your House bill to close Doge? What is needed to do that? Would you like to ask that yourself?
Yeah, that was the main question, a part of it too. Where are you at, and where are you at in the team to make that happen? And so I'm thinking about it more as I've been sitting here tonight. It might be a little soon because you may not have the backup to do it. And I guess with that, is there a lot of documentation going on of what is happening with that organization in order to do that so that you have backup and reason to do it?
So we've introduced the Delete Doge Act. We've gotten a number of Democratic co-sponsors and support. We need 3 Republicans to join with us to be able to get anything done. So far, we haven't seen my Republican colleagues be willing to do that, though privately they will express deep concern about what's happening. So we're going to keep working on it, and part of the effort of introducing a bill is to have a very concrete thing that they could sign on to, you know, because sometimes it's hard if you're like, do something, and they're like, sign on to this bill. We have not gotten great documentation. In fact, one of the things we've been trying to do is get better information on what Doge is actually doing. One thing you all can do to help, actually, I'm giving you all a homework assignment. Get ready, get your pens out. You can FOIA Doge for what information they have about you. And after you do that, set Freedom of Information Act. On our website, we have information on how to do it. Maybe? No? We'll post it.
We will post it.
We will post it. Or on our social media. We'll get you the information. After you find out what information they have about you, please let us know. Don't actually send us your social security number. Just tell us they have your social security number. But that is one of the things that we are asking folks to do because we actually aren't getting a lot of good information on exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. In fact, we've asked many of the agencies they're working on, like, okay, what is the criteria you're looking at for the programs that you're cutting? How are you deciding? There does not seem to be any sort of methodical approach to this. And so we are really relying on community partners to tell us, like, oh, our funding has gotten cut, to know what's really going on. And so you all are our eyes and ears on the ground. So FOIA Doge, please don't send me your social security information, but tell me if they have it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to sort of do the fact finding and get those answers, but we don't have a lot of insight into it right now.
Hello, Congressman Jacobs. My name is Krista DeBoucher. I live in San Diego. I'm very happy to be here.
My question was addressing Republicans in Congress who have expressed, either publicly or I have heard, are expressing to fellow Democratic colleagues that they're afraid. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean they're afraid of being primary? Does that mean there's a threat against their life? What the heck does that mean? It would really help my understanding of kind of recognizing what the problem is here. So from your experience mingling with these folks, what is your understanding of what I'm afraid means?
Yeah. I would say there's like a couple of camps. So there are some true believers that are as crazy in private as they are in public. Honestly, I kind of respect it more because, like, at least they actually are saying what they believe, right? And there are a lot who, you know, behind closed doors are actually pretty reasonable, are willing to work with us, kind of know some of the things that they're saying and doing are not right. And a lot of what I hear from my colleagues, when they say they're afraid, they literally mean their physical safety. Now, there are some who are afraid of primaries, but, you know, so as you all know, I was elected in 2020, and so my 4th day in office was January 6th. And prior to that, we'd done a bipartisan new member orientation, and because it was COVID, really the other freshmen on both sides of the aisle were the only people we were able to interact with. And so I got to know a lot of my Republican colleagues really well. And there are a lot that I'm still friends with that in many ways I respect a lot. And literally one of them told me, like, I voted for the objections to the election because that day they threatened my family, and I can't do that to my kids who are at home while I'm in DC. So they literally mean their physical safety in many cases. And that's part of what we're seeing right now. That's so scary. Now, yes, a lot of it is like people in their district, strong supporters. I have not heard instances of like official government violence that they're worried about. It's really more like Proud Boys or these like other militias or just death threats that they get. I mean, thank you to the sheriffs for being here because like being a public official, you do just get a lot of these kinds of threats, but I think for a lot of my Republican colleagues, it's very acute and very specific to certain votes. Now, I'd like to think, I believe, that I would still vote the right way. I don't have kids yet, so, but they literally mean their physical safety. And that's part of the very scary sort of spot we're in our political dynamics. I know that doesn't make you feel better, but. Okay. There was some question about what congressional security is like. We don't have a huge budget for security, actually. I try not to talk about it too much publicly because, obviously. But there isn't a huge allowance for congressional security. So often it's sort of up to the discretion of your local police or sheriffs. I'm very lucky here that you know you all saw probably on your way in that we had the sheriff here, but you know it's really sort of dependent on where you are. And I think I heard someone in the back talk about hate coming from all sides, and I have been protested by the right, the left, I don't know which direction. I think it's actually, you know, in my study of sort of history and successful pro-democracy movements, it is really important that we are very intentional about using nonviolent tactics because that
My name is Nikki McCullough, and lifelong Democrat, and I want to know what board can we do to help you pass your get out of town Doge bill? What's it, HR 2601?
2160, yeah? 2106.
2106?
Not a great question, too.
It's got all those four numbers in it.
Yeah, they're in there somewhere. The delete Doge Act.
What I want to know is that you can't do anything without Republicans. We're a democratic state. We're democratic people here for the most part. How can we address our questions and our concerns to the Republicans in the House that can help you get your bill passed? Individual voters here in California.
It's a good question, and part of the answer I cannot talk about here at this official event. I will say we are here in El Cajon. About 2 miles away starts a different congressional district. You all probably have many friends who live in that congressional district. I will leave that there at this official event.
My name is Donald Jacobs, and as I was sitting listening to all the questions, I decided I'm going to ask a different question.
Great. I love a good surprise.
I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy, and I understand that the Coast Guard Academy has gotten orders that all DEI material has to be removed from their library. And I'm afraid that's going to happen at the other academies, Air Force, Naval, and military. As a company commander, I didn't know anything about DEI. That's how long ago I was in the service. But I like to think that our current leaders are going to be knowledgeable and should be able to go to a library and read up on DEI and be able to discuss it in their classrooms with their instructors. I would like to know, is Congress going to do anything to get DOGE to stop with DEI propaganda?
Well, thank you for your service. And I will use your question to put in a plug that if you have any high school students in your life that are interested in going to the service academies, we can nominate them to the service academies. And again, Kate in the back, who covers all of our military and veterans issues, also covers all of our service academy nominations. So please reach out. We would love to talk to your students about why service academies could be the right choice for them and how we can help make sure they get there. We've heard some really concerning things. Actually, there was a letter that a number of members of the Armed Services Committee sent. We heard a lot of the academies, not only Coast Guard, were disbanding all of their student groups, like the Jewish student group of the Naval Academy and all those, and that they are similarly sort of trying to disband some of these things. To me, like this whole conversation about DEI in the military has gone so far away from what the real conversation is. But in almost every case, we are sending our military to different countries, different cultures. We will have a more successful military if they understand how to interact with people who are different from them and have different culture from them. And so to me, like, call it DEI, call it whatever you want. This is about teaching our service members who are often going to be deployed in places they've never heard of, working with people who are very different from them to be more successful in that. And that's, at the end of the day, what we want is to make sure we are setting our service members up for success. And so to me, teaching them how to interact with people who are different from them is an incredibly important part of that. And we're going to keep pushing and fighting on that.
Being mindful of time, I'm going to do two at a time, and then we can get to more we will. David Hormoste, Jonathan Kemper. Are you still here? Okay.
I love your City Connect Padres shirt. Excellent.
Good evening, Congresswoman. I'm Jonathan from San Diego. My question is, do you see any evidence that the protests are having a positive effect? Meaning, are they getting noticed by your Republican colleagues?
So, House Democrats have a four-part strategy to how we're pushing back on what this administration is doing. We're introducing legislation. We've already talked about a lot of that legislation. We're working with outside groups on litigation efforts because we don't have standing to sue, but we can file amicus briefs. I've signed a number of them and do other work. We're doing our oversight job, so as I mentioned, I went to Guantanamo, I've gone to the Department of Treasury, to USAID, we're asking questions. But the fourth and most important part of the four-part strategy is public pressure. And we've seen that public pressure actually does work, right? So when we saw the Office of Management and Budget put out a memo freezing all federal funding, and there was a huge outcry against that, they pulled that back. And we actually saw it in the first Trump administration, when there was a huge outcry about family separation at the border, they changed the policies. And we know from other countries and other contexts, Erica Chenoweth, a scholar at Harvard, has done a lot of studies that show if you can get 3.5% of a population actively engaged on a consistent basis, that's when things change. So I do think they're being noticed. I do think they're having an impact, and I do know that many of my colleagues are noticing when they are starting to hear from their own constituents about the impacts these things are having on them.
Hi, Congresswoman.
Go Padres.
Thank you for being here. I just want to say you've been a huge advocate for the LGBT community. I know that trans issues are a personal issue for yourself. And so my concern, or what many people in the community concern is, potentially Democrats going towards the center or towards the right when it comes to specifically trans issues. I think the last election, people were saying that one of the factors that contributed to the Trump win was Democrats' views on trans women, or trans people in general. Based on what you're seeing in Washington with the party itself, do you have any concerns about the Democrats sort of moving towards the center, trying to throw trans people under the bus?
I do. If all of you don't know, my youngest sibling is trans, and my middle sibling is gender non-conforming. So we're a real millennial family like that. But also these issues are deeply personal to me, and I see the impact that the rhetoric that comes from our leaders has on the mental health of people. And I've seen the huge change my siblings have had when they started living as their true authentic selves. And that's what I want for everyone, right? To be happy and fulfilled and be able to be themselves. Now, I spend a lot of time educating my colleagues about these issues because a lot of people haven't met a trans person or haven't met an openly trans person, right? And so for a lot of people, even Democrats, it's kind of a foreign issue, and things are scary when you don't understand them, right? So I spend a lot of time educating, and if any of you have questions, please, I'm happy to give my little education. I have like a whole thing, the chart, it's great. But I also think that there were some in our party who have a fundamental misunderstanding of what we saw in the election. And it's not only Washington, D.C. In fact, sometimes I'm more worried about what we hear from a certain someone who is in Sacramento. And I still don't know about what he said. But to me, what we saw in the election was not that people hate trans people. It's that when you are living in a world of scarcity, when it feels like you are not getting what you need, it is easy to find someone to blame that on. And it's not so much that they were mad, for instance, that trans people were getting government-funded surgery, it's that someone else was getting a government-funded surgery while they were drowning in medical debt. In the same way that it wasn't so much that they hated asylum seekers and that asylum seekers were getting housing, so much that someone was getting housing while they could barely afford rent. And so to me, the answer is not to scapegoat a population that's already being scapegoated and vulnerable enough. The answer is, how do we get out of this idea of scarcity and recognize that in the wealthiest country the world has ever known, everyone can have housing and everyone can have health care. And we don't need to blame asylum seekers or trans people because we don't have that.
Thank you for that. And I do want to, next time you see Congresswoman McBride, just send her a little love from us here in San Diego.
Okay, so we have I was the first Sarah ever in Congress, we think. Yeah, first Sarah ever in Congress. We now have the Sarah Caucus. It's me, Sarah McBride, and Sarah Alfred. We're all under 40, also it's very fun. We meet regularly, we have a text chain. They have ages, I don't, but I'm the senior member, so. And also, they started this new thing where like we have official mentors and mentees, and Sarah McBride is my official mentee, so I still love her. Sarah Caucus is strong.
Okay, I'm going to try and get through this next two, but we do have 9 minutes, and I want to be very respectful of the Grossmont folks who have stayed open for us. So please be brief and please be brief.
Yeah, okay. That's okay.
Mejigan Ashton and Ken Calvert. Maybe just one. Maybe two.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. For those of us that work with pro bono legal support, I am the Executive Director at Borderlands for Equity. It's based here in East County, but we serve the whole of the San Diego County region. We are concerned about the cuts and the limiting of legal advocacy support. And for so many people in the community, they don't have resources to seek that support, such as students trying to exercise their First Amendment rights, folks that are being targeted at their jobs or in their unions, or trying to unionize and not being able to. So we want to be able to ask what supports are there going to be put in place, or that we can seek to support our fellow organizations that have been cut.
It's a good question. I've been really disheartened to see a lot of these big law firms kind of capitulate to what I would argue are unlawful demands by the Trump administration. I know a number of my colleagues who are lawyers, I'm not, are pushing back and kind of ascertaining how these actions impact sort of the rules as they relate to the bar associations in those states, etc. I think there's going to be some more public action on that pretty soon here. I have been heartened to see now a number of the next round start to stand up, and I think that's really important, right? Because you can't have due process if you don't have any lawyers who are willing to represent people in the process of due process. And so I think, it's one of the things we see in other countries, right? Like when you have democratic backsliding, you see attacks on civil society, like lawyers, like universities, like the press, right? And we're starting to see that now, and it's very concerning, but we have started to also see people stand up, like Harvard and other university institutions, like some of the law firms, and I'm hoping that sort of courage begets courage, and that we're going to see more people stand up and push back on this, because I don't think we should accept any of this as inevitable, and in fact, the more people who stand up, the more we can push back. All right, Ken Calvert, and I don't know if you know, but there is a member of Congress with your name, and I thought maybe that it was him here coming to ask you a question, but you are not him.
It's not my fault. Over the years, it seems that Congress has delegated a lot of their powers to the executive branch. And they seem content with that while they're in power. But are there any plans to change that should the Democrats regain power?
All right, this time is definitely not my Republican colleague, Ken Calvert. It's an excellent question to end on, because we I think I said at the beginning, I think we're in a constitutional crisis, and I think in part the constitutional crisis is the executive branch completely ignoring and flouting judicial orders. But the other, maybe even more important part of the constitutional crisis is Congress, Article 1, according to the founders, the most important branch, the first among equals, completely abrogating its responsibility. And honestly, that's been the case on both sides of the aisle, right? And one of the things I am disheartened by is that actually when we were in power after the first Trump administration, we didn't do some of the things that I think we should have done to constrain some of this executive power, because when you're in charge, you want it, right? I am working with some of my colleagues on what some of that could look like, whether it's through the National Defense Authorization Act or other ways that we can try and wrest back some of that power. I think it's really important, but it also requires a Congress that's able to actually address issues. And part of why we've seen the executive branch take so much of this power over time is because Congress has been unable or unwilling to actually, the last time we voted on an authorization for the use of military force, I was in middle school. And I'm young, but I'm not that young. That's kind of ridiculous that we're still using these authorizations from when I was in middle school, at Earl Warren Middle School. And so I do think it's important that we do that, because part of why the founders had Article 1 be the first among equals was because we are the closest to the people, right? And while 800,000 people is a lot of people to represent, it's way less than 400 million or whatever the heck it represents, right? And so I think it's important that we do that. And part of that is also changing the way we write our legislation, so that it's actually Congress that is making a lot of these decisions and not delegating so much to the regulatory structure, especially in the world of Supreme Court decisions that have eroded the executive branch's ability to make those regulations. So, yes, working on it. So that I hear Amy's stress from over there about the time. I just want to thank you all again for coming out tonight and staying so late on a Tuesday. Thank you to Grossmont for everything you did to help and for staying open late. Thank you to my incredible staff who did really the hard work. I just want to stand up here. If you didn't get your question answered, if you submitted your contact information, we will send you an answer. If you still have a question, feel free to write it down and get to know the code, and we will get you an answer if you put your contact information. Also, follow me on social media, Sara Jacobs, sign up for my newsletter. That's where we get all of our information at. You can call our office. Kate is in the back telling me I need to wrap up. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Get home safely. The Congresswoman's next town hall is going to be May 19th. If you want to mark your calendar, Monday, May 19th. She has promised to do them in a variety of mediums and locations to be accessible as possible to folks. So the next one will be a telephone town hall. Again, if you Google Sara Jacobs town halls, you can find more information about that. Thanks, everyone.